Hello to all. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Sitdowns. As you know, I am R. Adrianus, also known as Raf. I'm a writer, and here we're going to be talking about, some things that are interest to me, not only in regards to writing, but also in regards to the things that are, relevant to a writer's life. Things, like books, films, comic books. Not a so guilty pleasure, but guilty enough. But today we're going to be talking about the horror movie genre. I put in a video sometime in the recent past that we were going to be doing something about film genre, and I was like, what could be best for the next installment of the sit down? Something about film, yeah, definitely, but how about something relevant to the upcoming holiday coming, in October? We're going to be having my favorite holiday, Halloween. I love Halloween. It's one of I think it's one of the most underscored holidays celebrated in Western culture. I know that there's other kind of Days of the Dead holidays celebrated around the world, but they have like kind of different elements to them. Not really the same cultural function. But for me, Halloween is really great, and what better way to celebrate it than to commemorate through one of our videos. Let's give it some intellectual discussion. Let's bring it to light. And how would we do that? We talk about horror movies. Horror movies are one of the greatest examples of Western culture glorifying the idea of Halloween, the idea of horror, and kind of like the deathly qualities of reality. So let's jump right into it. I mean, what makes a great horror movie? We have your slasher films, your monster movies, your kind of like dreamlike movies, where the victim is caught up in some sort of like sewer reality, and then you have kind of like your cursed movies, people who find themselves doing something or falling into circumstances where they are now cursed and they have to live with this curse, and it shows itself in various capacities. You have movies like The Grudge, who obviously there's like a death curse, and they're haunted by the victims of the death curse, and pretty crazy stuff. But I mean, what are the forefathers of the horror movie genre? We have Psycho, Friday the 13th. We have Halloween. What else? Even further than that, like Creature of the Black Lagoon. We have Dracula. We have Frankenstein. And remember, everybody, very important. Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the dude who created the monster. So keep that as a note. Tattoo it on your arm if you're so worried about forgetting. I hate it when people get that wrong. It's my little pet peeve. But yeah, those movies, I think what they capture so well, and what they exemplified so perfectly, is the idea of suspense, the idea of the unknown, the things that we cannot explain. That's exactly what humanity is afraid of. They're afraid of things that they can't explain. It's one of those more popularized ideas now in our horror movies. But back then, I mean, it was one of the more undertoned themes of the genre. You have Dracula and Frankenstein, which were some of the earlier horror precedents, and vampires were creatures that we don't really understand, and they overpower us. They have these magical attributes to them, and then the monster of Frankenstein, was this abomination created from several different human bodies, and that has its implications, its horrific implications. And then you go a little bit further down, and then you start evolving more into the slasher movie genre, or subgenre, should I say, where the victims are now tormented by a singular person. It's not even a creature of any sort anymore. It's not a vampire. It's not a giant monster created from human parts. It's just one man. It's one crazed person, and that, when I saw kind of like the evolution of the genre, and I started thinking about it, you start noticing that the way production teams started making their stories is that horror oftentimes can be embodied in one singular entity. It doesn't necessarily have to be, like a race of creatures like vampires, or it doesn't have to be through the scientific efforts of a scientist and, the resulting madness of his creature. It can just be one person going around and, basically exerting their madness upon others, through violence, and that's horrific in itself. And then, that's one of the things that made horror movies so provocative and so compelling, and it still makes them, as such today, because they capture kind of almost a tabooed, a very frightening idea that oftentimes other films might not do, because either it doesn't promote well, doesn't sit well with audiences. I mean, in many ways, horror movie audiences are sadists, or not, or they're sadists for the victims. They want to see the characters victimized, but then also on the flip side, they're masochists because they kind of want to feel that horror, that dread that builds up inside them when they're not even sure what's going on in the film, and they feel that kind of by extension of the story, them being connected as an audience member, that they might be victimized. I think deep down, every audience member of a horror movie who's ever watched a horror movie and felt themselves moved by it in some way has felt that they will be victimized. Because of what's happening in the movie, it feels like, whoa, that could happen, could it not? Would that happen to me on my way back home today or something? Like some serial killer comes after you, or maybe some otherworldly creature is going to be hiding in your closet. I mean, that fundamental fear of the unknown that we have as kids. There's monsters in the closet, mom. Like, that's what horror movies is bringing to light, and it's a fantastic medium, for this idea. I don't think that there's any other genre that's captured it as well. I mean, we have like the dramatic genre. We have like movies that are more suspenseful and mystery oriented, less horrific, and they kind of do a good job of that as well. But it's tamer, it's more realistic, and it's not exactly what humanity is afraid of. Realism, surprisingly, humanity can understand and they can reconcile, but it's the unknown, the surreal, that is what's frightening, and that's one of the things that makes horror movies, so amazing. And then now we're gonna have all our modern, the contemporary films that are following in the footsteps of the horror movie forefathers, is, if we might put it that way. This year, what did we get? We got The Conjuring. Right now, Insidious Chapter 2 is out in theaters, and we had Your Next, which apparently, from what I read, I haven't seen it yet, I'm looking forward to seeing it, is they said that it does a really good flip on the slasher movie subgenre. And, what other great horror movie films have we got in recent years? I remember watching The Haunting in Connecticut. I thought that was an excellent film. Surprisingly, some horror films can be very campy, very B grade, which is another aspect of the genre. It's kind of the fun part of it. You can kind of laugh at the sheer hilarity of what's going on. It's just so silly, but it's still an experience. But other movies like, The Haunting in Connecticut was great. It's just your haunted house movie, but with a different sort of twist. Everyone thinks that the house, or like the person brings the haunting to the house or whatever, or it's the house that's the one that's haunted, and it gets inverted, it gets confusing, and that's one of the appeals of that subgenre. Something else that I watched recently, the original Insidious 1 was excellent. I thought that, which is also another flip on the haunted house, haunted person subgenre. Let's see. There was a movie that came out. Oh, I can't believe I totally blanked out on that one. Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity, despite what you might think about it, is actually a really good horror movie franchise. Many people have kind of knocked it because it's starting to get in sort of a repetitious rut, but I think that it's just really fundamentally made film. They stick to one element and they try to use that to provoke as much fear and suspense as possible, and as long as you kind of allow yourself to accept what's going on in the film, I think it's very enjoyable. And like I mentioned earlier, The Grudge, another modern accomplishment, and this is how the genre has kind of spanned all around the world. It's horror is not something that's only in American filmmaking. It's something that's very universal. One might argue that Asian filmmaking captures horror even better than Western filmmaking. Some of my favorite horror movies are Japanese or Korean. One of my favorite films, like I mentioned earlier, with The Grudge, the original Ju-on, is an excellent horror movie. It's very unnerving, and just they're not afraid to use blood in the most the coldest ways. It's just really, it gets under your skin, and it may not be gory, but it's just, there's blood, and just the use of it, its placement, the composition of the way the movie is made with the use of blood. It's not some sort of gory battle film. It's a horror movie, but it's truly horrific with that blood. Blood and ghosts. That's a good combination all the time, because ghosts aren't supposed to have blood, but they do. So, and then another one is called Voices. It's a Korean film. It's kind of another haunting type movie, but that one is not afraid to kind of pass those boundaries. A lot of horror movies of late were a little bit more timid. They were a lot more mild than kind of what the forefathers had set, before them. Horror movies were supposed to be about breaking boundaries, and then we kind of slumped down a little bit. But Asian filmmaking, they didn't. They transcended that. They wanted to take that a step further, and then now we're seeing Western films kind of go along with that trend. We're starting to make suspense a lot more shocking. We're starting to make the frightful element of these films hit you harder, and that's what is bringing the audiences back. And I think horror movies are going to be on the rise, and maybe even one day horror movies will be as revered as the other genres of film. Because one of the reasons I did want to talk about horror movies is because horror movies actually are not that formally recognized in the Academy. Everybody watches it every year. The Academy Awards, they watch the Oscars to see which actor got that best acting Oscar, which actress got it. But there's never, and it's always like best film, best animated film, best foreign film, and or like best actor in a comedy or musical, best actress comedy musical. But no one ever really recognizes best actor in a horror film, because horror films a lot of times are kind of like oh yeah, you make horror films, but horror films are excellent, and they can be done very artfully, very well. And I think there have been films in the past that should be recognized as such, but hopefully we'll be seeing it in our lifetimes, in our generation. That'd be excellent. And lastly, horror movies, just for me as a writer, I've really enjoyed horror movies because they've kind of given me that sense of surrealism that I've wanted to put into my own work. As an audience member watching this, from a writer's perspective, I think that what these production teams have done is top notch. It's really great work, something that should not be kind of snided at. It should be commended. It should be nodded at. Yeah, I really like the transcending nature of horror movies, because horror movies, to put it in a very rudimentary phrase, they're not afraid to go there. They're not afraid to go there. As long as they kind of know what they're doing. But yeah, horror movies, really great. Great inspiration for me as a writer, great fun for me as an audience member, and I think that there should be a lot more notoriety for horror movies, more than just kind of the cult followings that have accumulated over the years. Everyone should be like, yeah, let's go to see this horror movie because it's gonna win an Oscar. That would be great. I would love to be there. So yeah. Everyone, hope you enjoyed this. We're gonna be doing another edition of the Sit-Downs next week. We'll be bouncing around a few ideas as to what we're going to be doing, but for now, everyone enjoy your week. We'll be posting another video maybe later in the week or maybe on the weekend. Until then, everyone, stay cool, peace and love. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check us out on the Tumblr as well. This has been another edition of Sit-Downs, and we'll be seeing you. Bye.